Washington Post and MSNBC. Eugene, thanks very much for joining us tonight.
Oh, it's so great to be here, Rachel.
Does Haley Barbour's history of race relations and political parties in the South square with your understanding of race relations and political parties in the South?
Well, gee, Rachel, I was there too.
Yes.
And do you mind if I just rant a little bit?
Oh, Gene, allow me to pop popcorn, but you just go.
Well, look, there was a time, yes, when the Democrats were Dixiecrats and the Democratic Party was a party of segregation. Then came a little thing called the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Now, that was passed by Lyndon Johnson, who was seen by many white Southerners as a race traitor. Johnson said predicted at the time that his civil rights legislation would cost Democrats the South for a generation. He was being modest. Among the Republicans who opposed the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was Barry Goldwater. Well, in the November election in 1964, Barry Goldwater against Lyndon Johnson, Goldwater won precisely 6 states. He won his home state of Arizona, and he won 5 states in the Deep South. He won Louisiana, Mississippi, Haley Barbour state, Alabama, Georgia, and South Carolina. I wonder why. It was the first time those Deep South states had voted for a Republican presidential candidate since Reconstruction. I wonder why. We all know why. It was because that was the moment when the Republican Party began to become the party of white Southern grievance, the party that was essentially resentful of the fact that there was integration, the party of private academies, which were started in places like my hometown of Orangeburg, South Carolina. And this idea that in the 1960s, in the mid-60s, segregation was somehow a settled matter, that we were all done with that, my generation was so enlightened. Well, you know, in my hometown, again, there was an incident called the Orangeburg Massacre in which 3 black students were killed by state troopers in a demonstration that had begun over a segregated, all-white bowling alley in the middle of town. The year was 1968. The news of Brown versus Board of Education and the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act must have traveled by Pony Express to reach those Deep South states. But this was by no means a settled question. And Haley Barbour's version of events is the biggest bunch of revisionist claptrap I think I have ever heard in my life. Thank you, and rant over for now, but I reserve the right.
I would like to just actually cancel the rest of the show and put that on a loop, if you don't mind. But, Gene, let me ask you about this, though, because Haley Barbour making up his own history about this is an interesting thing about Haley Barbour, who's considered to be a very credible Republican candidate for president, among other things, in 2012. But it seems like it fits this larger Republican effort right now. The Republican Party's website right now, they have their list of accomplishments. It is as if all they've ever done is work on civil rights, like in the military, at Ole Miss, in Little Rock. They wrote Brown v. Board. They are making the case for themselves as the party of civil rights, and Democrats have been lying to you about that. How do you understand this overall strategy?
Well, first of all, I find it really hard to remember those phalanxes of young, white, liberal Southern college students who were standing with the civil rights marchers, at least in my hometown. We must have missed out on that. And also, I seem to recall, by the way, that during this period, like, all the black people left the Republican Party and went to the Democratic Party for a reason. It seems to me there are 2 possibilities. The generous one is that this is perhaps the way Haley Barbour would like to remember his racial attitudes and his history of the period of the 1960s. Maybe he likes to think that that's what he thought and that's the way he behaved. The more cynical view of it would be that this is not really an appeal for the African American vote, which they're not going to get, and not really a serious attempt to rewrite the history books, but just to kind of muddy the water and soften the edges, and perhaps allay the concerns of, say, white suburban independents who would perhaps vote for a conservative, but perhaps not vote for a bigot, and so I think this appeal really isn't for the black vote. It's to try to be a part of this stirring chapter in American history and blur the historical edges, which we will not allow to be blurred, because what happened happened. The South has changed an awful lot. I think it's perfectly appropriate, and it's very good to look at the new South and how it's different from the old South. But in fact, we will not forget what the old South was like.
That's absolutely right. It is on the record. People can still tell the tales. We have the photos. We have the people who experienced it, and this stuff cannot be rewritten. I couldn't agree with you more, and I look forward to keeping those edges sharp with you into the indefinite future, Gene. Thank you.
Great to be here, Rachel.
Eugene Robinson, of course, a Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist for The Washington Post, MSNBC contributor, and I'm very happy to say my pal. I'm always happy he's on this show. All right, so it was a debate for the ages. The incumbent seems to lose all sense of where she is and what she's supposed to be talking about. She resorts to nervous giggling, looking around and grinning maniacally at the camera while saying nothing for very long stretches of time. And that's before we get to the part about the fake headless people. Next.